right, we are in Esther chapter 2 today. So we did get through Esther 1 last week. We're in Esther 2. So let me give you a little background before we read these verses. So Esther, last week we were introduced to Ahasuerus, who has a queen named Vashti, who he basically, because she won't do what he wants her to do, he has her removed as queen. And then about 3 or 4 years transition between 1 and 2. So what happens in this time is that Ahasuerus is kind of busy trying to conquer Greece. So he does this big expedition to try to overtake Greece. And there's a movie out there which I necessarily wouldn't recommend watching, but you have the 300. It's called 300. It's about these Greek men who took on this Persian army, basically. Well, this is Xerxes. This is the Bible, in a sense, coming to life. This is what happens in between 1 and 2, is that you have him, this Xerxes, going to Persia, leaving Persia, going to Greece, trying to overthrow Greece, and he's defeated. And he ends up coming back home with his tail between his legs, so to speak. He comes back home defeated, and he gets back and he settles into his routine, and he kind of misses his wife. And that really is what leads us to the first part of this chapter. So you're going to see that kind of some big jumps in these different chapters, and you see that here. From 1 to 2 is about 3 to 4 years. So verse number 1 says, "After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's young men who attended him said, 'Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the province of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel, under the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given to them, and let the young women who please the king be queen instead of Vashti.' This pleased the king, and he did so." So it's pretty self-explanatory here. He wants to pick a new queen, and so they're going to go out and they're going to find all of the most beautiful women they can find in the kingdom, and they're going to bring them into the king's harem, and then he's going to pick from one of those to be his queen, okay? Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, said that there were at least 400 women that were chosen in the Persian Empire, okay? So he's got 400 to choose from. So what's these different shows they have where the Bachelorette, okay, this is a version of that, okay? See, we thought we were new and fresh. No, it's just we're doing stuff that they did a long time ago, and that's just what happens here. So this is the bachelor is picking out his future wife. Verse 5, "Now there was a Jew in Susa." All right, so we're now introduced to what we would look at and say the key figures in the rest of this book. Okay, so there's a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. So Mordecai is in Persia because his family was taken from Babylon into Persia. And then it says he was bringing up Hadassah. Now Hadassah is it is her Hebrew name. Esther is her Persian name. So it says he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle. So Mordecai is Esther's cousin, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Once again, we don't need to go into detail. If you're going to rate Esther on a scale, she's a 10. On the 1 to 10, she's a 10. And she's got the whole package. She has a beautiful body, a beautiful face. And so that's really what the writer of Esther is trying to get across to us. She was a beautiful woman. Verse 8. "So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in custody of Hegai, Esther also was taken in the king's palace and put in custody of Hegai, who had charge of the women. And the young woman pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. So what's the point? The point is, Mordecai said, don't tell anybody you're a Jew, which I have a problem with, which we're going to talk about later. But he's like, keep your identity down. Don't let people know where you've come from. Just kind of blend in. Go with the crowd. She's, in a sense, is saying. So Esther had not made known her people or kindred. Verse 11, and every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. They had no cell phones. They couldn't text. There's no Facebook. There's no Instagram. He has no way of knowing what's going on. They don't even have telephones. So but he craves information about this girl that he has cared for his entire life, or her entire life. So he cares deeply for her, and he wants to know what's going on with her. So he keeps walking in front of the palace to find out what's going on with Esther. Verse 12. Now when the term came for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus, after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, since this was a regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with spices and ointments for women. So basically they took a year to get these women in the proper treatment to go before the king. So they would get them in a proper shape, and they had all of this beautification process that they went through. And it seems pretty elaborate, but when you're Ahasuerus, you think you're a big deal. And so this is what's going on with him. It says, when the young women went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. Did I skip a verse? No, that was good. I was at the right one. Verse 14. In the evening, she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem, the custody of Shashgaz. What a name, huh? The king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go into the king again unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by his name. When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter to go into the king, she asked for nothing except what Hegai, the king's eunuch, who had the charge of the women, advised. So Hegai likes Esther a lot, and he says, this is what the king likes, so do this. I want you to get the gig. And so he tells her what Ahasuerus likes. Verse 16, and when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus in his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. I've titled the message today, God is the hero of the story. Okay? And the reason why I've titled that today is because we are introduced to Esther and Mordecai, and the temptation sometimes when we go through a book like this where Esther is on the name of the book, it is to make Esther the hero. And Esther did some great things, but ultimately it was God that worked through Esther to do what she did. Okay? And this is really important for us to understand as we go through our lives. That ultimately, what I desire from me and what every Christian should desire from them is that God is the hero of our story. That people see us and they say, what a great God, not what a great guy. Not what a great gal, but what a great God. God is the hero of the story. And so I want to point out several things. So you got a lot of notes in your bulletin, so don't flip out. I'm actually moving pretty quickly through the sermon so far. Right? Number one, it was God that made Ahasuerus miserable. it was God that made Ahasuerus miserable. So he gets back from this war with Greece. He's embarrassed. They didn't conquer what they wanted to conquer. He's bummed out. He misses his wife. But he knows because of the laws of the Medes and Persians, he can't take Vashti back. So they got to pick a new queen. And this is very important because if you've read ahead, I don't know how many of you have read ahead, but you know that there's a man that's going to raise up named Haman, who is anti-Semite, like he wants to destroy all the Jews. He actually sets a decree to have all the Jews destroyed. And so God's got to get somebody in a position of power who can help the Jewish people so they won't be exterminated. So it was God that made Ahasuerus miserable and desire a new wife. I mean, he's the king. And if you study a little bit about Xerxes, he was a very promiscuous guy. I mean, it wasn't an issue of I need to be with a woman. He was with all kinds of women. He was a very immoral man, but yet he wants somebody in that figurehead of queen. So he feels this desire to put somebody in Vashti's place, and that's where Esther comes into the picture. So it was God that did it. Now, I believe that Xerxes is probably in hell. I mean, he didn't believe in God or repent. I mean, he wasn't a God follower at all. But God is working in him to get Esther where she needs to be. This reminds me of what it says in Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. This is why we are encouraged in the New Testament to pray for all of our leaders. Because does anybody in the room get frustrated with your leaders? Everybody totally happy 100% with your political leaders that we have? Okay, I ain't. I'm very frustrated. However, I should involve myself in the process, but you know what I should do as much as I involve myself in the process is pray for those people. Because the hand of the king, the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he turns it wherever he wants. So we need to pray for our leaders. We need to pray for our president. We need to pray for our vice president. We need to pray for our senators. We need to pray for our congressmen. We need to pray for our governors. We need to pray for the people who have been placed over us, that God would do a work in their heart, because God can do whatever he wants to do. So it was God that made Ahasuerus miserable, and consequently he starts looking for a wife. He starts looking for a queen. And God often does that. He creates desires in our life to get us, or he does things that makes us move a different direction. I've always loved the story of Elijah. You know, Elijah was super depressed because he took on the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel. God gave him the victory. Then because of what happened on Baal, you had the queen Jezebel say, I'm going to kill you. And it really defeated the guy. So God took Elijah and he put him in this cave, and he had these ravens do DoorDash, and they brought in food to him. It's the truth. I mean, it was the pre-DoorDash. I mean, these ravens bring this food to him, and he's sitting by this brook, and man, he is living the life. He is drinking this fresh water. He's gotten this food brought directly to him, and he gets pretty comfortable. And so what does God do to get the guy to move? He dries up the brook, because he's not leaving. DoorDash is coming every day. Water's in front. He's good to go. So what God have to do to get the guy to move? Dry up the brook. What does God have to do sometimes in our life? Dry up the brook. And then it's like, well, we got no choice but to move. You know, you look for another job when you lose the one you have. And God often works that way. It was God that made Ahasuerus miserable. It's God behind the scenes. And this is the reason why I'm emphasizing this, and I didn't explain this at the first. But one of the criticisms of Esther, for example, John Calvin never preached on Esther. He never talked about it. Martin Luther hated the book, said it shouldn't be in the canon. And the reason why is because God's name is never mentioned in here. But because the name of God is never mentioned in this book doesn't mean that God is not at work, because God's at work all over the place. And God's at work here, even in this king Ahasuerus. So it was God that made Ahasuerus miserable. Number two, it was God that gave Esther her beauty. It was God that gave Esther her beauty. She was legitimately beautiful woman. And there's nothing immoral, sexually immoral about saying that is an attractive woman. Okay? You need to get your mind out of the gutter. No, if I watch the sun come up and I go, that's a beautiful sunrise, I'm not being immoral. And then if I look at a part of God's creation, a person, and say, that's a good-looking man, or that's a good-looking woman, that's a beautiful woman, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is what we do after that. The problem is where we allow our minds to go. And in this instance, Esther is a beautiful woman. And physical beauty creates opportunities for you. It's just the way it is. We love the beautiful people. And we listen to the beautiful people. So Esther is not beautiful on accident. She's beautiful, and not just because of great genetics. You know, you see a good-looking person, they usually have good-looking parents. But sometimes you see a person and then you see their parents and you're like, I ain't seeing it. Right? Y'all know what I'm talking about? Okay? Well, what happened? In every instance, in every person, God formed them in their mother's womb. Psalm 139:13, for you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. Physical beauty creates opportunities for you. Don't use those for self-serving purposes. It was God that gave Esther her beauty. It is God that gave you your talents. It is God who gave you your abilities. The reason why Patrick Mahomes has such great eye-hand coordination is because God gave it to him. So God deserves the glory. But what happens a lot of times is we take it. Look at how smart I am. Look at how good-looking I am. Look at how powerful I am. Look at my gifts and my talents. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about in general, we do this. And we get these ginormous heads, and we think that we're all that, when in reality, we didn't pick any of that. It was all given to us by God, so he deserves all the glory and all the praise. It is God that gave Esther her beauty, and Esther needed to acknowledge that. And it created an opportunity for her to be the queen. And that's really important for us to understand. God is the hero of the story. So whatever opportunities have been created or given to me because I have this gift or this talent or this beauty, God deserves the praise. Number 3, it was God that moved Mordecai's heart for Esther. It was God that moved Mordecai's heart for Esther. So you have Esther's parents. We don't have any details. We just know, according to verse 7, that her father and her mother died. Mordecai, who is her cousin, which is obviously an older cousin, takes the responsibility of caring for her. Now, if this is a good Jewish family, man, there's a lot of kids, and whoever Esther's parents were probably had brothers and sisters. Why is Mordecai doing this? Why is somebody else in the family not stepping up? Once again, we have no history on that other than maybe they just didn't want the responsibility. I have incredible respect for people who foster. I just do. I mean, God blessed us with 3. I couldn't imagine doing 4. Just in the sense that, it's hard enough to do your own, to kind of train your own kids, much less to bring in other people's kids and try to train them. So people that have a heart for that, and that's why I think, God gives us a heart to do things. And a lot of times, especially in the church culture, we try to shame everybody into doing what our passion is. This is one of our mottos here, and I don't want to get off track, but you do in the sense you serve in the way that God has encouraged you to serve. So don't just do kids ministry because we need kids ministers. If you hate kids, I don't want you anywhere near kids. Right? Because it's gonna make the situation bad. Like, I don't do kids ministry. Couldn't do it. Don't have the patience for it. I would be in my face if I was up there saying, if you preach long one more time, buddy, we need to get out in an hour. See, a lot of you are offended at that, but because you're kids people. You love it. You love the dirty diapers. You love the screaming. You love the attitudes. You love it all, man. You love dealing with the parents whose kids can do no wrong. That's not my heart, but that may be your heart. So Esther's family, everybody feels bad that Esther's parents have died, but the only one that stepped up and said, I'll take care of her, is her cousin. Now, where'd that come from? Well, Mordecai lives in Susa. The king's there. We got to get Esther to Susa. So God gave Mordecai a heart to care for Esther. It was God that did that. It's God that gives us our passions. If your passions are counter to the Word of God, then that's not a passion from God. But if your passion is to do what God wants you to do, that is a passion from God. It was God that moved Mordecai's heart for Esther. Number 4, it was God that caused Haggai to favor Esther. It was God that caused Haggai to favor Esther. So there's these 400 women. Who's the one that sticks out to Haggai who works directly for the king? It's Esther. There is a saying in life, and it's very, 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 very true. It's all who you know. Y'all ever heard that saying? It's all who you know. And that's the truth. How'd you get this job? Well, knew a guy that worked in here. You ever look at somebody like, how'd you get in this building? Somebody knew somebody. So all these little connections that we have in life, they're not accidental. So Haggai comes onto the scene, and he's basically doing all this work for Ahasuerus, and Haggai really notices Esther. Do you think that was accidental, or you think God is at work? I think God is at work. And the reason why I think that is because if you go back a little bit further to Daniel 1, 8 and 9, it says, remember Daniel was taken by Nebuchadnezzar to Babylon? And while he's in Babylon, he resolved that he would not eat the king's meat. Remember, they had a certain diet that they wanted all these young guys to eat, and he says he won't eat it. And it says this in Daniel 1, 8 and 9. Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. So who was it that gave Daniel and his 3 buddies favor? It was God. Who gave Esther favor with Haggai? It was God. And who gives you favor with the people in your life? It is God. It was God that caused Haggai to favor Esther, and it is God that works in our life to connect us with people that he wants us to connect with. Number 5, it was God that prompted Ahasuerus to pick Esther. It was God that prompted Ahasuerus to pick Esther. So you know she is the winner of the beauty pageant. She's the winner. She's crowned the queen. And God was behind all of that. Once again, first point. The heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wants. So Haggai worked to get Esther to the front of the line. The queen meets Esther and says, don't need to go anymore. Don't need to know anybody else. She's the one. Okay, at the end of the day, it was God that prompted Ahasuerus to pick Esther. Number 6, the final point, and this is the most important one. It is God that uses flawed people. It is God that uses flawed people. When you read through this, and maybe you felt the same thing that I felt, when I read through it. When you read through this, it makes me uncomfortable. Mordecai and Esther make me uncomfortable because of a couple of things. One is they're basically trying to be undercover Jews. Right? I mean, they're not. Mordecai is telling Esther, don't tell anybody you're a Jew. He doesn't tell anybody he's a Jew. He's trying to keep it on the down low. That makes me uncomfortable. I'm not saying he should walk around and make it a big deal, but it's just like people who say, well, I'm an undercover Christian. There's no such thing. In the sense that there shouldn't be any such thing. I mean, people at some point should learn you're a Christ follower. If people work with you for 20 years and go, man, I didn't know you went to church. Okay, that's a problem. Your life should stick out in a way where people are like, there's something unique, there's something different. And not because you're a goofball. I mean, true? So what should we do? This is what I've always said. We should go to our jobs. We should work as hard as we can at those jobs because we're not looking at our boss as our boss, but Jesus is our boss, and I want to live to please Jesus today. So I don't care about who my boss is. I care who Jesus is, and I want to work in a way that pleases Christ. And I want people to go, dude, you need to calm down. Why are you working so hard? What's your deal? Or just to be a person of integrity. You just tell the truth. You do what's right. You be ethical. You're not a whiner. You're not a complainer. You do what God has gifted you the ability to do. And then there should be something that sticks out at you that should create a conversation where people go, what's up with you, man? But Esther and Mordecai are playing this little, don't tell anybody you're a Jew. Another thing that's a little uncomfortable is, so this is around the time, like Pastor Jeff's going to, on Wednesday nights, he's going to teach through Ezra and then Nehemiah, right? You're going to go to Ezra into Nehemiah. So this is all happening at this time. So what happened is that the Persian king said, you all can go home. You can go back to Jerusalem, but it's going to be really hard. Mordecai's like, I don't do hard. I'm going to stay here. So he chose the comfortable route. It was easier for him to stay in Persia, kind of adapt to the culture, than it was to go back to Jerusalem, try to rebuild the walls around the temple and rebuild the temple and all this. He just didn't want to deal with all that. He wanted to stay here. And then the whole thing, probably the most disturbing is, this whole beauty pageant thing, it's a little bit more sensual than even the text is letting on. So she spends a night with the king. Is there sexual activity that happens here for this virgin woman? We don't know because the text doesn't tell us. But man, it's just kind of uncomfortable. I mean, do you think her parents would be proud of her for marrying an uncircumcised Persian man? I don't think so. The Jews were very adamant about you marry a Jewish boy. And she's trying to win this beauty pageant and become queen. Why? Because she wants to be queen. That's a big deal. So what's the whole point? Mark, you trying to make me think worse of Esther? No. I'm just telling you that God uses flawed people because that's all he's got to use. What did Jesus say to the people that were going to stone the woman that was caught in adultery? He that was without sin cast the first stone. And even those self-righteous guys were like, I'm out. You must remember, and I must remember, that whoever God uses to bless you is a flawed person. Too many people tie their faith to people. And what happens is, if you tie your faith to a person, when that person disappoints you, you will then be disappointed with God, and then it will lead to disillusionment and oftentimes deconstruction. Right? Because your eyes are on a human being. Love the people who make you love God more. I like that guy because he makes me love my Father more. Is that guy or is that gal going to disappoint me? Probably at some point, without a doubt. But the thing that's going to help you sustain your faith is if you keep your eyes on Jesus. Because God uses flawed people. Esther is a hero. Esther did a courageous thing. Esther walked into the king and risked losing her life to protect her people. I'm not trying to diminish her at all. I want us to make sure as we go into this study and we look at all of these things about Esther and Mordecai, that we understand that these are not perfect people. These are flawed people that God used to accomplish his plan. So that really encourages me because it means that there's hope for me. That God can use me too, and God can use you no matter how flawed you are. The fact that you are still doing this means that God is not done with you yet. You say, Pastor Mark, you don't know what I've done. Doesn't matter. I know your God, and I know he uses flawed people. And the fact that you're in this room today is not by accident. And I know the roads stink, and you made an effort to get here, but there's a reason why you're here. And God wants you to hear today that he only uses flawed people. And what is required of us is just simple, God, I know that I have disappointed you. I know that I have let you down. I know that I am not worthy, but I humbly submit. I pray as you teach us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done in me. So when I pray that, I start with me. God, let your kingdom come in me. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So one of these days, I'm going to have peace that's incredible. I'm going to have joy that the world will never understand, but everybody in heaven will have it because we'll be in heaven and we'll be in our glorified bodies. So every day of my life, I pray this, God, let your kingdom come in me. Give me the peace that I will have someday today. Give me the joy that I will have someday today. Give me the self-control that I will have someday today. Your kingdom come, your will be done. So whatever I'm going to face today, Lord, help me to trust that it's all a part of your plan. God uses flawed people. And he's not done with you yet. I I know those are cliches, but they're the truth. If God used Mordecai and God uses Esther, and let's even say this, if God used Haggai and God used Ahasuerus, unsaved, heathen men who are probably in hell today, he can use you. Stop fighting. Stop making excuses. All that matters at the end is that God is the hero of the story. And that's really all our heart and our prayer should be, that God is the hero of the story. Let's pray that when people stand at our funerals, they will not say, that was a good dude. No, that was a good dude that pointed me to Jesus. Amen. God is the hero of the story. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.